Hello, welcome to the Cello Law Weekly Webinar. And today is November 10th. We're going to be talking a little bit about what is Congress going to do about the backlog? Is there going to be anything attached that would help with immigration? Or is it going to be like we have seen in days past where they're going to punt it to the next session? We're also going to talk about EB-5 today and try to debunk some of the issues that people seem to have about the EB-5 program. And we have a special guest with us, Daniel Robinson, who either should have joined us or will be joining us shortly. And let me see if he is there. And so I'm gonna promote him to panelist. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for coming. And I've promoted you to panelist. But let me go over some of the quick immigration updates first. Well, after almost pre-pandemic, March of early 2020, or February of early 2020, really, we are seeing the ability of people to freely travel, specifically in those 33 countries where they have not been able to travel. Vaccinations are required for all international travelers, and the COVID-19 bans have been lifted. Incoming travelers must be vaccinated. And we've got a really good article that I'm sure that they will link below on the guidance in terms of COVID-19 vaccinations and the streamlining process for those Afghan refugees and the exceptions that they have put in place for those individuals. Now, remember we talked about how they are waiving for Afghan refugees settling in the US fees and biometrics appointments and expedited processing for work authorization or to adjust status. So the EAD delays continue, but the lawsuit that has outlined to try to expedite the processing for dependent visa holders, what is happening on that? The lawsuit contests that the L2 visa holders shouldn't need to apply for an EAD since they're eligible for employment incident to status. Lawsuit also says that H4 visa holders be eligible for automatic extensions of their EAD if they're in valid status beyond their EAD expiration date. Remember that automatic extension is provided for H-1B and other non-immigrant visa holders when they file an extension. It's called the 240-day rule. Those individuals, if they file a timely extension, are eligible to continue work authorization 240 days while the extension is pending. Now, for EADs, that's only been limited to adjustees. And I think the time limit for them is 180 days. And I don't know who comes up with these numbers. Arbitrary, and why they've singled it out just for adjustees that are, filing for their permanent residence and not for, other EAD holders. And that's one of the issues the lawsuit is contending. And the lawsuit works to demand timely EAD adjudication for adjustment of status, E2s, purposely not addressing the delays for L2s and H4 visa holders given the other ongoing lawsuits. So what's happening with Congress? That's the question of the day. They did pass the infrastructure bill, but they still have to tackle the Build Back Better Act, which proposes to increase the immigration visa fees. Yes, $100 increase for I-130, $800 for I-140, and get this, $15,000 for EB-5 applicants. These fees are in addition to the existing fee structure, and they would be deposited into the general fund of the Treasury and may not be waived. The NFAP analysis estimates that a company would spend at least $31,800 for initial H-1B filing, and an extension in permanent residence would add another $10,000, $15,000. Currently, H-1B engineers are earning a higher median salary than US engineers. There are more than 1.2 unique active job vacancies in computer occupations in the United States as of September 6, 2021, up from 15% 6 months ago. Only about 56 new H-1Bs filed by companies in companies for computer applications each year, meaning that there are 20 times more job vacancies in computer occupations as new H-1Bs for those types of positions. And this is what Congress should be working on, because when you have job vacancies, there's a number of ways to build up the economy. The infusion of foreign direct investment. But production is a critical way. And remember, these producers, these highly skilled engineers, they're not just salary earners, but they're also consumers. And so by freeing up this H-1B quota that we have, or trying to align it with at least the critical workforce need that we have, would be so beneficial to the United States economy as well. In EB-5 news, December 3rd, 2021 is the new deadline for the annual appropriations bill. And if the EB-5 regional authorization is not included, we could have to wait sometime in 2022 for the reauthorization. Some statistics that may be interesting to you: in the third quarter, remember that the regional center sunset at the end of June. So the third quarter statistics show that I-526 forms that they received, which would have to be direct, are 169. And they approved 592. That means that was from the previous backlog. There are 12,000 overall, 798 still pending, but 93% of those are for direct investments. And fiscal year to date, they've received 356. And I'm going to check my stats for that, because they don't break it down by direct or indirect, but 356. Year to date, they've approved 2,348, but there's 12,798 still pending, as I said. So this is, even though the processing time shows that 30 months from, it's gone from 30 months to 31.6 months, that also includes the regional center petitions, which they're not touching. So it is a really quirky way in which they calculate the processing time. I hope that they will break it down by direct and indirect, because that could make it a lot clearer. Because remember, they're not touching the regional center applications. So my prediction is, mine alone, but that these direct investments, because they take up such a small percentage of the overall applications, 526 applications, we will see that they are processed at a much faster pace. The USCIS Investor Program Office, IPO, should be refocusing its efforts on adjudicating direct investments while the regional center petitions are held in abeyance. But they have admitted that they have taken some resources off the I-526 applications and used them for other areas, which I think has got to violate the way the agency funds are appropriated. But nevertheless, the reason why we are having this EB-5 webinar today is because when the appropriations, if the regional center reauthorization is attached to the bill this December 3rd, then it's in all likelihood going to see an increase. Remember, because of some, I guess, procedural errors that the agency had followed when they increased the fees last year. At least they increased for both rural and for anywhere else that's not, let me see, both for a targeted employment area. Sorry, I said rural, but targeted employment area and any location that is not a targeted employment area, from 500,000 to 900, and then they increase the all other areas because of a procedural mishap on their part. A federal district judge said, hey, your procedures were in place. The person who authorized this, because they did it through agency notice and comment, that they didn't have the authorization to do it. So the DHS on the very last day filed an appeal, which I found interesting. I thought that they could just do notice and comment, and they could rectify it much sooner than they could get, a hearing for an appeal. And I thought they would understand that they're not going to be very successful on the appeal, because the very issue that the federal district court judge pointed out has been pointed out in a number of lawsuits unrelated to EB-5. So the likelihood of success on the appeal is very low. But I think they did it this way to get Congress to act. Good luck with that, right? We haven't seen very much being able to really stimulate that agency that body to do much of anything. But that's probably why they did that. So you most likely will see, if it's reauthorized December 3rd, an increase. Then you have this 15,000 additional filing fee, which may or may not get passed, but there is that, that's looming. So this is the time. I mean, I don't really think that we're going to get anything addressed on the backlogs, although we hope, and we're pushing for that. And for those people who filed, 17, 18, 19, this may be a great mechanism to use so that you can truly get your permanent residence on a easier basis. So even though the regional center was not reauthorized, we have direct investments. And there are regional centers that have restructured their process to allow for direct investments, which is good, because then you can leverage the ability to use the $500,000 threshold now, and without worrying about the increase in filing fees or the future increase in the threshold to invest to benefit from the EB-5 program. And the interesting thing is, when you look at direct investment, a lot of people ask me, I got a cousin, I've got a friend. I always worried about those direct investments that are not founded on a very strong financial structural project, because of those smaller projects and because of the sometimes lack of financial sophistication of the individual who is structuring it. Number one, if there is some other issue that could impact production, that could impact your ability to be successful on your for your investment. So you want to make sure that the project you're investing in, that the person or the group that is actually developing this project has that financial sophistication. Number two, one of the things in the USCIS policy manual is, if a project has been approved for regional center designation, then the USCIS is not supposed to look at the viability of the project. Because when they look at an I-526, there are two main components that they review: the viability of the project and its ability to, in the future, create those 10 jobs per investment. The other thing they look at is the trace of funds. So by using or by investing, making a direct investment in a entity that's already had regional center designation, that's already had a number of their applications approved, you have eliminated 50% of the review process. So as long as you've got a good trace of funds, which, you know, our office is, we're very particular about. Sometimes clients have told me a little too particular about trying to trace those funds, then you will have a successful I-526 application. And with that, I would like to welcome Daniel Robinson, so he can tell us a little bit about his project and some of the things that they have structured for direct EB-5 investment into a regional center. Daniel? There you go. Yes, and for those of you who don't know Daniel, and I would be surprised because I think Shaker tries to mention Daniel on every webinar, and I think, Daniel, not to take anything away from you, but number one, I think it's because, you know, it's your Blue Devil affiliation, and then number two, it's your interest in cricket that has really charged him up. But for those of you who don't know who Daniel is one of those people, I think the correct definition would be like a Renaissance man, right? The man with, I mean, I talk to him and then I will say, oh, this painting is really good. And he goes, yeah, I was a curator, and he has this extensive knowledge on that. And then we'll be somewhere and, oh, this drink tastes really nice. Yes, I used to bartend. And, you know, he'll go, he has the breadth of knowledge on that. And then I think as a joke, I said, yeah, you know, next you're going to tell me that you played Major League sports. And he goes, well, actually I did, but I injured myself. So I gave up. But the one thing that I did know about Daniel was his strong background in the financial realm, and that the fact that he was, you know, one of the initial, the OGs of I-5 of regional centers, and successful ones. And if you were ever in the Durham area, one of the most wonderful projects I've ever seen is when they took a bank and they made it into a hotel that has been lauded and won a tremendous amount of awards. So he not only knows how to make the project successful from a EB-5 perspective, and he has for that. We've got folks that are already getting their conditions removed, but he knows how to do it from a business perspective, which is what I try to underscore to everyone, is you want someone with that business financial knowledge so you know that your investment is being taken care of. Danny, you want to tell us a little bit? Did I leave anything out?
Well, I mean, we could have talked about scrubbers on coal-fired power plants. But,
oh yeah, that's right. I remember.
Yeah, no, that's a hard intro to follow. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we've been doing this for a while now. We've remained small intentionally. You know, we had the opportunity to partner with and merge and grow and take on much larger projects. And I think what we found over time is that retaining the ability to get to know each and every one of our investors directly and spend some time with them and their families so that we can really understand what their goals and motivations are.
And that's one of the things that kind of sets you apart from most other regional centers is,
yeah,
you have dined with a lot of your investors, and you don't use agents. They can talk to you directly and ask you questions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you jokingly referred to us as sort of one of the OGs in the regional center space. I laugh, you know, at the time we were approved, we were the 42nd regional center in the country. And for those who don't know, there are almost 700 now. At one point in time, there were closer to 900, but many of those have been terminated. I think at last count, we're one of the 15 or 16 oldest left in operation. But like I said, you know, if you look at the names ahead of us, it's the larger more global approach, regional centers, and not to disparage the way they do business. It's great and it works for them, but for us, we wanted to take a more personal approach and make sure that we built relationships with folks and got them comfortable, not only with the process, but with us as their partner in this for years. So
fantastic. So tell us, just give us a brief idea of your previous projects that you've had, so we get some sense of, I talked about how seasoned you were.
Yeah, so we're currently raising capital for our fourth EB-5 project. The first two were in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is a coastal town on the Atlantic Ocean, just inland a little bit up the Cape Fear River. Here in North Carolina, one was a marina project on the river there. The other was a cold storage facility on the port. It's not the largest port on the East Coast, but it is one of the 4 or 5 largest ports on the East Coast. And serves North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. We did those 2 projects in partnership with a local developer in Wilmington and the State Department of Commerce here in North Carolina. But we realized pretty quickly through those that focusing on projects that we played a development role in was probably the best way for us to protect both the immigration and the investment interest of our clients. And there are different schools of thought on that. You'll run across marketing agents or some other regional centers who take a hands-off approach, who say, "Oh no, you should look for projects that have a hard line of distinction between the regional center and the project," and that's just always seemed counterintuitive to me. I want a single point of contact that I can relate to on both the immigration and the investment side, and I want to make sure that there's someone there who understands both of those aspects. Because what many regional center investors, what many EB-5 investors in general don't understand is that from the time you make that investment and file your initial petition, your immigration process and your investment tend to run on separate, though parallel, but separate tracks. There are milestones within each of those processes where they intersect again, and we need to provide some data and documentation to USCIS. But I always relate to people, it's possible to lose all of your money and get your green card. And it's possible to make a ton of money and not get your green card. What you want is somebody that finds that happy medium.
Do both. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And I've just never understood how, if you've got 2 separate entities running those 2 separate tracks who aren't in constant communication with one another, how you can really look out for the best interest of your clients. So that's been our approach from day one. And I think it's one of the reasons, Lakshmi, that this transition toward direct EB-5 investment, given where we're at, in the world of EB-5, is a relatively easy transition for us to make. It's one that we spent a lot of time thinking about, as you well know, because you've been kind enough to entertain, I don't know how many conversations with me over the last few months as we evaluated this opportunity. But, we spent from July 1st until probably the 3rd week of October. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, really trying to determine whether or not this was the right thing. And I think after much thought, we came to the conclusion that it absolutely is, for reasons that I'll get into.
Yeah, and that, from the immigration aspect, where with a regional center investment, you can invest into the, the entity, and then that entity, the NCE, for a direct investment, you have to invest into the project,
right,
the actual job creating entity. And so because there are not, as I've seen with other more complex, EB-5 regional centers, layers with that, I think what you're saying is that made it easier for you to accept the money in the job creating entity.
Yeah. And, one of the things, and like I certainly appreciate the way that you presented it during the intro. I do want to draw one distinction. I think our regional center experience obviously is valuable both for us and for investors as we look toward direct investment as an opportunity. Technically, it's not the regional center. The regional center plays no role in the direct investment, right? In our case, it's the principal of the regional center, me, who is playing an active role on the direct investment side. And I think it's those years of EB-5 related experience that we attained through our involvement in the regional center program that make us as well qualified as I think we are to offer a direct investment option to prospective investors. In this case, and I know we've talked about this previously, but what I think makes our project in particular compelling and the structure that we're pursuing is that we've been able to create a very obvious and fine distinction between the jobs allocated to our regional center investors and the jobs that will be allocated to our direct investors. And we were able to do that because the project that we're working on is significant enough that we were able to address all of the job creation needs for our regional center partners through the indirect means via construction expenditures, right? And so what that means is that we're not touching a single one of those direct jobs in the hotel enterprise for our regional center folks. So we're able to allocate every single one of those direct jobs with no risk of competition between the two groups.
Right.
To our direct investors, and as we create that nice, clean distinction between the two.
And for those of you who may not have not joined our webinars before on EB-5, when another distinction between the regional center and the direct employment is regional centers. The application for regional center designation usually includes an analysis by an economist that looks at the project and through the economist's formulas, with whatever they come up with, outlines how many indirect jobs that, like construction jobs, electricians, other types of indirect employment. Whereas with direct investment, it has to be direct jobs. I mean, there is some scope we've talked about within that, but effectively direct jobs. With hotels, because I looked at a number of some of the EB-5 denials, not anything associated with you or not associated with my firm, but just on the USCIS website to kind of read what's going on in the adjudicator's mind with some of the cases that they've denied. And it's one of the things that I saw in a few of them is the disconnect between, and this was all for direct investment, for the proposed jobs and what typically that hotel franchise outlines. So it's not enough that Daniel says we're going to create X number of jobs. The franchise usually has an estimate of how many jobs should be created for, an establishment of a certain size. And you've always cushioned whatever has been projected, right, Daniel? Whether it's been indirect or direct jobs.
Yeah, so on the construction side, we usually reduce our expected construction expenditures by anywhere from 20 to 25%, so that what the econometrics formula spits out is a greatly reduced number. And that's the number from which we work when ascribing job creation to our investors. Even from that reduced number, on the regional center side, we always like to have a jobs buffer of anywhere from 30 to 40% if we can. Interestingly, in this project, given where we're at on the EB-5 side, I think we've got about 140% jobs buffer in this case. On the direct side, you're absolutely right. So we actually have, and I may have shared this previously, we actually have 3 touch points, independent touch points that we can use to analyze what projected staffing in the hotel looks like. We've got, as you discussed, Laxmi, exactly what the franchise agreement with Marriott and the Westin brand require. Our economist who undertook the econometric analysis for the regional center side of things went ahead and projected a staffing model based on historical data to which they have access. And then further, we have a staffing model that we've been presented from our third-party operator. So we're actually bringing in an independent third-party operator to manage the hotel in the day-to-day. And so what we have are 3 projected staffing charts that result in anywhere from 145 to 163 qualifying jobs for the project. And so we obviously trend toward the lower side in order to provide additional protection to our investors. And so as a result of that 145 number, we'll be limiting the direct investment opportunity here to a range of between 8 to 10 EB-5 investors. So even at the higher end of that range, we'll have a 45% jobs buffer that can give our investors comfort that we're going to be able to hit those targets.
That's great. So now why don't you tell us, especially for those people who are not familiar with North Carolina and Greensboro, why you chose Greensboro for your project and what's been done so far, who are you partnering with, and a general overview of what is happening.
Yeah, so I'll try to be brief, but as you know, Lakshmi, it's a little bit of a winding story. So our interest in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is the location for the Weston project, stems from our experiences in Durham, North Carolina, where you mentioned we had our prior EB-5 project in the Durham Hotel. And what we've seen in the southeastern United States is a resurgence of these tertiary market urban cores. Cities like Richmond and Durham and Raleigh and Savannah, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Greenville, South Carolina, have all enjoyed a renaissance over the last 10 to 15 years. And each of those communities is still in various stages of growth. Richmond, which is probably the most established of those communities that I named, is still growing rapidly, as you and Shaker know, Lakshmi, from living and working there. So Durham really began this turning of the corner 10 to 12 years ago. We came in with the Durham Hotel. We began the development process 8 years ago on that. The timing for us was perfect. I'd love to tell you I was a genius and knew exactly what I was doing. We just had a great building and a great plan that came together at an ideal time. But when we began looking for other investment opportunities, Greensboro was a community that rose to the top pretty quickly because it has many of the same characteristics that we found in Durham. It's just about 7 to 10 years behind the curve in Durham. And so that analysis led us to believe that Greensboro is an ideal community for us to be making investments in right now. And that's how we ended up there. In terms of the project itself, again, we looked at that comparison between Durham and Greensboro. Realized that the city of Greensboro was in the process of constructing a brand new performing arts center, 3,000 seats, roughly the same size as a performing arts center that had opened in Durham about 3 years before we opened Durham Hotel. And that's become a huge driver for us in Durham. We knew that the same would be true in Greensboro. And so we've really taken that and run with it. And thankfully, we've watched it come to fruition even in the face of a global pandemic. The Tanger Center for the Performing Arts in Greensboro was finally able to open a few months back. They've shattered attendance records for the Niederlander Group, who is the management company. And we've already seen a significant material economic impact in the local community as a result. So we worked with Marriott, with PM Hotel Group, to determine which of the brands we thought was the best fit for the local market. Weston quickly rose to the top of that analysis. We wanted something with a full service luxury feel, would appeal to a market like Greensboro, and would provide the services and the level of amenity required to fill a void in downtown. And so we began the development process several years back. As most folks know, the development of a new hotel is a long-term process from tip to tail. And as we got into it, the city of Greensboro approached us and asked us to partner with them on the construction of a large parking garage that would serve as an amenity for the hotel and for the downtown community on the whole. And so in terms of where we're at right now, all of the design and development work is done. We've completed foundations and have started vertical construction on the parking garage component of the project. We anticipate that being completed sometime in the next 12 to 14 months, depending on weather, production schedules. As we all know, supply chain issues have increasing concern even in the construction industry. So we're looking at that 12 to 14 month timeline on the parking garage, from which point we'll directly move into construction on the hotel, which will run about another 14 to 16 months. So we're at this point targeting a late Q4 of 2023 to sometime early Q2 of 2024 opening, which we think aligns perfectly with where the region and the country on the whole are from the perspective of recovering from COVID. So if you look across the hospitality industry and read what the pundits are saying, I think everyone's pretty convinced that it's going to be late 23, early 24 before we're back to 2019 levels. So we feel like it's an ideal time to be opening.
And my understanding of the Greensboro region in terms of foot traffic is there are a number of universities and colleges around that area. And I remember that when I would visit, when we had an office in North Carolina, that every time I'd hear about a conference, the conferences were all in Greensboro. And I could never understand that. Even the basketball conferences that
Duke dominates.
Yeah, well, maybe last time, but.
I'm kidding. So, for those who don't know, Laxmi and I have a friendly little rivalry. She's a UNC fan, and I'm a Duke fan, and the college is a rival. No, you're absolutely right, Laxmi. I mean, I think I told you last time we were talking, it's really an optical illusion, right? So Greensboro sits right smack dab in the middle of the state. And, North Carolina has been a burgeoning economy for years. We're home to a number of 26 Fortune 500 companies have their headquarters in North Carolina. I mean, most people don't realize that. We're really popular business state, and have a lot of industry groups and nonprofit groups around the state as well. And they tend to rotate their conferences between the eastern, western, and middle parts of the state. And somebody brilliantly in the Triad and Charlotte areas decided to convince the entire state that it should go east, middle, west, middle, east, middle, west, middle. Middle part of the state got twice as many conferences. And it's worked out well for Greensboro. It's become a hot spot for meetings and events, conventions, and the like. And so we'll be able to benefit markedly from that. Your other point about the academic community is spot on as well. There are 8 colleges and universities in Greensboro, 43,000 undergraduate students, 30,000 graduate students. And the thing that we love about that, we benefit from the academic community in Durham with Duke and North Carolina Central University. But that's 2 colleges, right? With 8, you get 8 basketball games, 8 parents' weekends, 8 homecoming weekends, 8 biotech departments that are all participating in an academic conference. And so it's an ideal situation for a meeting and convention hotel like the one we're building.
And when you say convention hotel, just for those people who don't understand or want to better understand how the hotel and the convention part kind of interrelate.
Yeah, so Greensboro is one of those communities that over the years has sort of missed out on an opportunity. There are a few hotels in the downtown area, none that we think are on par with what we're building, which is why we're moving in. But there's not a lot of meeting and event space, and so we were able to acquire an existing 70,000 square foot building, which was an old department store that had already been converted into a meeting and event space. And, we'll marry that with the garage that's being built as well as the hotel tower that's going on top of it. And what it'll allow us to do is incorporate about 20,000 square feet of meeting and event space, which is a number typically, or a number that's higher than you would typically see in a 180 room hotel. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, there are ample hotel rooms in the area to accommodate the foot traffic that meetings and events of that size would bring in. We just don't have the meeting space in the downtown core to accommodate them. So not only will we be able to drive business to our own hotel, but we'll also be able to derive meeting and event business from other properties around the area, which again, we think puts us in a little bit of a unique competitive advantage.
And it's not only because another thing I always tell folks is make sure whoever you're investing your money with has some skin in the game. Yeah. Because if they're just using EB-5 investment, they have nothing to lose. So, they're not going to be as fiscally responsible with your investment if they don't have money in the game. Now, you've invested you and your partners have not only invested in the Westin Hotel, but you've also invested a substantial amount of money across the street, right?
Yeah, so the overall budget for the Westin project is about $60 million. We've got a little over, by the end of the day, we'll have about 11.2 of our own capital in the project. We'll bring in total somewhere between 16 and 18 million of EB-5 capital on top of that in the form of equity. The important thing I always like to point out there is that, as you know, Laxmi, no guarantees are allowed to be provided in the EB-5 program. It's a violation of the regulations around that, which is, as a side note, just always be cautious if you run across someone out there in the industry who is making guarantees, those could run the risk of violating your immigration status. So be very careful with that. But in the absence of being able to provide guarantees, what we've done in each of our EB-5 projects to date, we always place our equity in line behind our EB-5 investors. And that's not just annually when there may or may not be distributions available from cash flow. It's also at the time of exit. And what that means, and I welcome anyone who's interested in working with us or looking at the project to carefully read our operating agreement, which is a legally binding document. Our operating agreements make very clear, if we lose a single dollar of EB-5 capital, of your principal, it means there's nothing to return to us. So we would lose 11.2 million, even if each of our EB-5 investors only lost $1. And, I always tell people, I can't guarantee anything, but if I'm willing to put that significant amount of money in line behind yours with no access to it until I'm able to return your capital, I hope you can understand how much confidence we have in our project.
Absolutely. So although you can't, because the USCIS, the regulations clearly state that the investment must be at risk. And so that means there cannot be a guarantee. But
and it's even more so in the direct program, right, Laxmi?
Right.
Because unlike the regional center program, there's language in the direct program around participating in profits and losses.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll get to that in just a second. I was just going to say, but that's why it's really important to do your due diligence. And when I keep giving you these tips, make sure that the direct investment is with an organization or a group who is at the helm that has experience in these types of projects and have seen them to fruition. Make sure that the priority of your investment is, as Daniel said, ahead of the developers. Make sure your developers have skin in the game. So these are all the things, although there can't be a guarantee, would give you kind of an assessment of what your risk is actually. And then Daniel, as he correctly pointed out, another difference between the direct and the EB-5 investment is EB-5 investors can be, as part of a partnership, that active involvement in the investment is actually addressed through that partnership agreement. So they really are not actively invested, but you've structured something so that the direct EB-5 investors into the Greensboro project would have kind of a voice, if you will, in the project.
Yeah, so and I was having a conversation with one of the families who will be joining us as direct investors in the project earlier this morning. And, as I mentioned, from a job creation perspective, the Weston project in Greensboro just aligned perfectly with our ability to satisfy job creation for both groups without any overlap or competition. Well, likewise, the organizational and governance structure that we had chosen for the hotel really lent itself well to the direct investment also. What it's allowed us to do, we have a managing board of directors who oversees the day-to-day fiscal needs of the company and interacts directly with the management group. But we can easily slide an advisory committee or an advisory board in that would be comprised entirely of our direct EB-5 investors. And what we're going to have the ability to do is organize that advisory committee in such a way that I'll head it up, we'll meet quarterly. Our investors have the opportunity to participate in those meetings in a very active manner. And, they'll have the opportunity to ask questions and provide input, get some guidance on how things are going with the hotel and understand how their investment's working, but also make sure that their voices are heard. And as those quarterly meetings get wrapped up, we'll roll directly into our board meetings where that information will be brought to the attention of the board and will be taken into account and weighed as we're making the decisions that the board needs to be making to run the hotel. So there's a nice streamlined way that allows our investors to get as actively engaged as they choose to be, certainly meets the requirements of the program, and I think provides an additional layer of oversight that's good for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And so that should be, in addition to meeting the regulatory requirements, with the quarterly meetings, they would have access to you to hear about what the progress is, what is going on, ask
Exactly.
questions, provide their input. So that is actually an additional layer of, I think, comfort that goes not only to the analysis of the approvability, but also to the analysis of the risk, when you're assessing for any investment. Anytime you're investing any money, you're always trying to assess what the risk is, and that should give him, some sense of comfort in that aspect as well.
Yep. I agree.
And you've already, with your indirect filings, you've had, how many filings have you filed for through your EB-5 Regional Center program with that same project?
Yeah, so on the Greensboro project, we have 27 regional center investors who have filed petitions. Of those 27, 24, 23, sorry, have been approved. And you have to forgive me, we have about an even mix of well, out of the 27, I think we have 13 Chinese investors, 13 Indian investors, and one, oddly enough, from Canada. The Chinese investors, as I think most folks realize, are subject to backlog in retrograde. And I know that's a concept that unfortunately many Indian investors are familiar with as well because of other employment-based categories. Two of the approvals that we're still waiting on are with our Chinese investors. The others are with the later investors in the project, who are still well within the operating parameters. Though obviously, as you mentioned earlier, Lakshmi, we're sort of in the middle of a sunset period with the regional center portion of the program. And so those folks are anxiously awaiting the renewal and reauthorization of that.
Wonderful. And so, and can you remind me again of those? How many did you say were approved that you said?
23 of the 27, I believe. I can pull up the spreadsheet, but it's somewhere between 21 and 23.
Yeah, the only reason why I say that is just from with my lawyer hat, it's kind of nice to be able to say, hey, USCIS, you've looked at this, you've looked at the details of this project before and approved it 21 to 23 times. So, that actually adds a lot more credence than a project that is not had the benefit of that kind of history.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of components to that, right? One is if USCIS, and I know you raised a point that irks those of us in the industry a little bit. It does appear that CIS has been pulling resources away from EB-5, and like you, I'm not sure that they have the authorization to do that, but it hasn't stopped. That said, to our knowledge, they don't draw a line of distinction between adjudicators for regional center projects and adjudicators for direct projects. And so, and they do, and we've seen evidence of this, they do try to ensure that the same group of adjudicators are reviewing the same project, right? So that folks aren't having to get up to speed on it all over again. And so, I think even though this is going the direct route, there will be some modifications to the business plan. There is a different set of jobs that we're looking to meet the job creation metrics. The basics of the project are going to be intimately familiar to the adjudicator pool. And we anticipate simplifying the review process. And we hope to see, at least during this period of downtime in regional centers, we hope to see a reversion back to something closer to the historical standards that we had gotten used to in EB-5, which were much more rapid review and adjudication timeframes than we've been seeing currently.
Yes. And I know that the Biden administration had promised that, and I think that, right, for what it's worth. But we have seen, I think it's in third quarter, at least across the board, some progress in that realm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to politicize this because I think we have a tendency to politicize too many things that shouldn't be. The reality is a well-functioning immigration system shouldn't stem from one branch of government, right? There should be the opportunity for collaboration and cooperation between the executive office and Congress. And, to the current administration's credit, I think that they're trying to take a measured approach and engender as much support from both sides of the aisle as they can for many of the decisions that are being made. Now, we can argue all day long whether that's a viable strategy and one that any of us would pursue, but that seems to be what's being attempted there. That said, we're going to have to see something meaningful happen on the regional center side to get that portion of the program reauthorized. And our hope between now and the end of the year is attachment to the omnibus spending bill of some nominal reauthorization measure. For better or for worse, that's looking increasingly unlikely right now. There is still hope of it. I've talked to a couple of folks who have seen a very specific proposal, but you've got the question of whether or not there'll be enough constituents within Congress who are willing to accept that. And then you also have, as we found recently with some immigration legislation, you've got to deal with the Senate parliamentarian who seems to be very willing to exercise their authority these days. So, there are a lot of things that are up in the air, but we think the basics of the project that we have and the parameters of the direct component of the EB-5 program marry up nicely and create a unique opportunity. How long that opportunity exists, who knows? There could be an attachment to the spending bill that increases the investment threshold again as early as December 3rd. So now certainly the time to get in and get engaged if it's something that benefits you and your family. So we're here to help in any way we can. Yeah,
and that's why I keep telling folks is because of those unknown factors that are out there. If you're interested in it, the time is now. And this would be a good time for you to leverage at least this small window, and we don't know how long this window will be open, of benefiting from perhaps faster processing times, from a lower threshold, from the existing, filing fee currently for the program.
And Lakshmi, you've known me long enough, and I was telling one of our current investors yesterday, one of the things that I struggle with, I don't feel like it's my place to tell a prospective investor what to do. This is a very personal decision. It's one of the decisions that any family can make, whether it's family on the whole deciding to spend a significant amount of their own resources and move halfway around the world, or a parent on behalf of a child who's saying, look, I think the best opportunity for you is to spend the next portion of your life 10,000 miles away from home. Those are massive decisions that I have no right to weigh in. That said, if your family has gotten to a place where this seems to be an opportunity that provides the benefit you need, for the first time in my career, I'm saying this is absolutely the time to do it, and you need to act quickly because there's just so much uncertainty around how long these parameters that make for the perfect storm right now are going to be in place, how quickly they're going to change, what the size of the is going to look like. And so it's hard for me. I don't feel comfortable doing that, but I will say for the first time, now is absolutely the time to do it.
Absolutely. And, I was going to say that there's a story of, I won't name the investor, but an investor who got into the process and she was worried about both her kids aging out. But we were able to get it approved. And because of the Child Protection Act, and if you have any questions on that, look at the link that we're linking up below and what CSPA is about. Both their kids were able to benefit from the EB-5 process. So that I am, as an attorney, I am effectively agnostic in all of this in terms of how you want to make the investment. But I do care that I know how important the process is. I know it's not just about papers. I know how critical it is gathering the financial resources. So I want to see it successful. I get paid no matter what, whether your petition gets approved or denied, my legal fees are for services provided, but that's not how we look at it. So when I tell you about best practices and what you should look for and concerns you should have, that's what I'm trying to address. And the reason why I always bring Daniel on the show is because my clients that have invested in his program, you know, they have been incredibly happy. And the couple of few who wanted to invest in somebody that knew somebody in their locality, and the guy was a doctor, and this was the first time he was building a hotel, had real struggles during the pandemic, because this was the first time that individual had developed a project like that. So they didn't know how to navigate it. So that's what makes me feel bad. And I know one of the first investors, Shaker and I had to stop on the side of the road because he was trying to decide between the Durham project and a project in, I think it was Florida, that his cousin's friend's cousin was running. And I looked at him and I said, you know, I'm not going to tell you which one to invest in. Just have your CPA look at the docs and ask him if it makes financial sense. It didn't make, the projections of that project in Florida did not make any sense to me. So he had his financial person look at it. And I think it was literally a day before his son turned 21, we actually filed with the Durham organization. So they're now in the process of getting their conditions removed and getting their permanent residence. And the project that they were going to invest in, that tanked. So he tells me all the time, he said, thank God you told me to have my CPA look at it, because my investment would have been gone. And now his son, who was a day away from turning 21, is now able to benefit from this project. So thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us today. And is there anything additional you'd like to say to the folks before we go to Q&A?
No, I mean, the only other thing I would add is you know, your team, me, we're available as a resource. As Lakshmi's intimated a couple of times on the call, she's not wedded to me or my project. She thinks EB-5 is a great option for certain people. We're one option within the EB-5 realm. I'm grateful that she's comfortable enough to allow me this opportunity. But, you know, we also realize EB-5 is not right for everyone. And, you know, talking about personal experience, Lakshmi, I know that I've had folks that I've sent to you for whom EB-5 just wasn't the right choice and they needed to be able to explore other options. So whether you're looking at our project or another project or EB-5 or some other means to get here, just take advantage of us as resources, because we're both happy to answer questions at any time, whether it's this platform today or if you want to follow up with email later. You know, we're here.
Well, thank you again. And I think we'll call our moderator, Shaker Chalo.
He might have gotten distracted by that embarrassing run of overs for England.
Of who?
From England.
Yeah, I am very happy for New Zealand.
Yes,
because they should have
sidetracked on cricket.
They should have won the World Cup. They should have won the World Cup in 2019, and just some stupid overthrows from New Zealand costed them game. But hey, it is Ben Stokes who took it off. You create the pressure and have the opponent make the mistakes, right? But hey, before we go further, I was thrilled to see Duke University in Madison Square Garden last night, winning convincingly. And so was North Carolina, since my wife supposed UNC, they won, but they were not in Madison Square Garden.
Remember, happy wife, happy life.
Right, yeah. So, you know, hey, that's always the case.
Staying out of that one.
Yeah. So, folks, we are big sporting folks, you know, people, all those folks who are listening to us, see how many participants are there. But, you know, we like sports, we follow sports. I even follow NASCAR. Just imagine somebody from India, from Southern India, NASCAR. Anyway, Daniel, that was a great presentation. And I just wanted to tell folks, I had the opportunity to visit the site last week, along with an investor from India, and they've signed on the dotted line. So, you know, construction is going well. Everything is, you know, on track. Hopefully, you know, there shouldn't be any more issues. So it's a great project, Westin Hotel and Conference Center, the biggest brand of Marriott. So, should not have any problems in terms of the performance of the project. I'm saying I'm not giving any guarantee or warranty. That's not my job, none of our job. But it's an opportunity to invest, and this is the best time, $500,000 as opposed to $900,000. So, I'd like you all to consider. So I'm sure people out there probably are thinking what to ask. So although I have some questions, but not related to EB-5 per se, but based on, my past interaction with, folks with whom I've been interacting about this project. One of the things, like I just told you, I was there last week. So Daniel and I invite any one of you to come to Raleigh-Durham area. You can fly into Raleigh-Durham Airport if you're a little far away. I'll meet you. And then go with Daniel. We'll go to Greensboro about 45 minutes, spend a couple of hours, look at the project site, get to see firsthand, look at the city, get a feel of what the city is. And it's a win-win situation, let me tell you that. And, I've said that in the past, Daniel has come to India with us for about 8-9 times, except for 2020, we've gone there every year, at least more than twice. And so he's familiar with India, Indian culture, food, weather.
Yes, he can even identify what's good
Traffic.
biryani and not good biryani,
Yeah.
which is
Right.
Very,
Yeah,
very
Paradise
picky when it
Biryani.
comes to biryani.
Paradise Biryani.
yes.
Right. So if there's if people have any questions or, any concerns about it, Lakshmi has already explained, the investment is at 500 because it was reversed by the US judge earlier in June, so the government of the United States did appeal, but the appeal verdict has not come out yet. So while the appeal verdict is whenever that comes, so between the time the judge is reversed until the appeal,
until they get the
verdict comes, all applications filed will be honored at 500K because that's the current state of the law. So a lot of advantages, so.
Right, and I want to welcome those on YouTube and the Q&A.
Telegram.
And so Shaker, you want to go ahead and get started with asking the questions?
Yeah, I don't
whether
see
they're EB-5 related or not.
Okay, so Daniel, you're welcome to hang around.
I think he just took off
yeah,
his.
but
Yeah, I didn't want everybody to have to watch me drink a glass of water. Sorry.
Okay, good, no problem. I just wanted to say because I'll be taking the questions, so you're welcome to hang around. Or you can just go watch VVS Lakshman giving his expert commentary on why England lost. All right. First question from Ravi Rao. Hi, Lakshmi and Shekhar Garu. My spouse on change of status F1 to H1B visiting India for visa stamping filed I-485 recently in October 2021. No AP EADs. Does traveling to India without AP cause her I-485 abandoned by USCIS?
No, because H-1B is dual intent, so you can intend to stay here temporarily and you can intend to stay here permanently. So H and Ls are the two non-immigrant classifications that can travel either on their visa or their advanced parole without abandoning their adjustment of status. Having said that, if you filed in October or November of last year, you should have received your AP EAD by now. So we have a seminar where we talk about how you can contact USCIS to find out what's going on with that. But, your wife can travel. She's going to have to be issued if her visa is expired, a visa to return. Because I think you said she changed from H4 to H1B. So she will need a visa when she returns. So there's still backlogs. So you may want to look at that to assess time frame and other travel specifics.
Yeah, it looks like, we probably don't have any additional questions? I think there's a comment on the chat said, yeah, she was on F1. That's what they said.
Oh, okay.
F1 converted to H1B.
Yeah, so she'll just have to process her H-1B visa. So look at the timeframes in terms of scheduling and so forth, so you can, organize your travel accordingly.
Yeah. So since the travel ban is lifted, and so in the chat we have pasted some vaccination requirements in travel FAQs. So do look at those and prepare yourself. If you have any questions, do let us know.
So if you have any, we're going to be posting this on all our social media, the link to this YouTube video of this webinar. Please join us on Facebook, Twitter, check us out on YouTube, where we have all sorts of information on lots of different immigration topics. Like, subscribe, forward it to your friends if you can. We also have a Telegram group, a forum in which people who are going through the immigration process right now can talk to one another, give each other encouragement, some data, and we're on there as well to provide information and clarification as and when needed. So if you haven't joined our Telegram group, please do. We will post these up on all these different, our social media platforms. And if you have any questions, just email us at info@chalalaw.com. We can get you in touch with Daniel and get you more information if you want about his project or any other project you would like. And I want to thank Daniel so much for taking the time out to be with us today. And I know that last time we had the webinar, it was after it hit YouTube that we started getting a lot of questions about the EB-5 program. So it seems like you're a YouTube magnet, and we got a lot of hits on that one. So
I follow your statistics closely enough to know that it has nothing to do with me. I think it's the charismatic Chala family and team. I just get to ride those coattails every once in a while.
But I do know how busy you are, so I really thank you for coming in and talking to us today. I think your insights are always great, whether it be about paintings or about the EB-5 program. I'm always impressed.
Well, you two are two of my favorite people, so I certainly appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you guys. And it means a lot to be here. So thanks again for the opportunity. And
yeah, definitely.
We do help.
Want to thank my team who puts all this together and puts all this effort together. Thank you, folks. Without them, this would not be possible. And so we want to thank Kara, and I think Lainey's going to be joining her soon with our social media marketing. So thank them, and we get a lot of input from Ashley, who usually she's on the operations side, but she worked with, I think, some baseball teams on social media in her previous life as well. So, she's got great insight. So I want to thank all of them. I want to thank all of you joining for the first time. Thank you for joining. If you've been joining us regularly, thank you for that. And thank you, Shekhar Chala, as always, for being a moderator extraordinaire.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for the opportunity. As always, a great attorney.
And we will see you next week, where we're going to talk about processing in Mexico. So hope
Thank
to see
you,
then.
Mr. Robinson. Have a good week ahead.
Thanks, everybody. You too.
Every weekend.
All right.
Take
See
care.
you on Sunday afternoon. Let's talk after the World Cup final.